So I ended my last lecture on the controversial topic and going over a controversial poster by a group called Stand With Us, a pro-Israel group, and making not necessarily a biblical argument per se, but a historical one, a nationalist claim that Jews are inherently um, the ones that have a right to the land, and yet at the same time, saying that they have been a minority for centuries there, a very, very small minority at that, and does that. But this comes up very much in the discourse of the current debates, and so that's why I wanted to really point that out. I'm going to point out a few more things in the modern context as well, because even though that's not what this section is devoted to, you can't touch on the topic now of Judaism without talking about the topic of Israel, while that wasn't the case for centuries as well. So anyways, I'm going to move on and we'll integrate that point further. Okay, so just kind of focusing on Judaism. So after 70 CE, the destruction of the temple, after the Bar Kokhba revolt, and after all of that, Judaism still had there was still a spark there to move forward and to continue the religion. And so a famous event, the Council of Jamnia or Yavna, Sassel is more known. There was the canon of the Hebrew Bible was alleged to have been finalized according to the Jewish tradition. It's very late, right? Remember, there's in the Catholic Bible, if you saw, there's First and Second Maccabees. That was written about the Maccabees, by the way. But it was around this time that you're also seeing Jews kind of say, well, this is great history books, but these are not the holy book. They shouldn't go in the canon, so to speak. Okay, so you have that process going on. The Talmud relates that sometime, and we're talking more about what the Talmud is. It's the rabbinic discussions. Let's just say that for now. I'm going to talk more about it. But the Talmud relates that sometime before the destruction of the Second Temple, Rabbi Yohanan ben Zakkai relocated to the city of Yavna, where he received permission from the Romans to found a school of law. Okay, and that place being significant eventually is going to be where this oral law, this word of mouth passed on, a set of laws that Jesus was criticizing in the New Testament, would be put to writing in this location. So in 200 CE, so that's after the Bar Kokhba revolt, Rabbi Yehuda Hanasi, or Rabbi Judah the Prince, his decision around 200, so right at the beginning of the 3rd century CE, he records down the oral law, also known as the Mishnah. Okay, and we have basically two works known as Gemara. Okay, also now, not to be confusing. Okay, if we're going to take something on the idea of law, we know there's different branches of law. Okay, so what ends up happening is that the Torah, if you guys are reading the Old Testament at all, the word Torah in Hebrew means instruction. Sometimes it's translated as law. Okay, and the rabbis kind of made stories and cases and discussions about, what to do with these laws. So this is also some of the things that Jesus would criticize. Okay, it says don't work on the Sabbath. So then the rabbis would try to argue, well, then what constitutes work? And so there was a big debate. Can you save an animal that falls into a ditch on the Sabbath? If the table chair breaks, can you fix it on the Sabbath? All sorts of things like that. And they were like really trying to figure out these kind of things. The Torah says in the Bible, do not boil a baby goat in its mother's milk, just in case you were tempted. No, not to disrespect, but it's very strange, right? Don't boil a baby goat in its mother's milk. Well, the rabbi said, well, this must mean no meat and cheese together. This is why in the Talmud, for Jewish eating, there's no cheeseburger. They're not allowed to mix meats and cheeses, because the rabbis then interpreted that's what it means when it says don't boil a baby goat in its mother's milk. Okay, so you had all these sets of laws, and one of them from the Gemara was the Babylonian, or what is Iraq, the Bavli, and the other was the Palestinian or Jerusalem Gemara, or it's a part of this. So there's several terms given. It's a little bit confusing, but essentially, not the Jerusalem one, but the Iraqi one is going to be the main source that still is used by Jews to this day as the main source of law. So there's two branches. So let's just say this: the Mishnah and the Gemara. If you can't remember what these are, or like, I feel like it gets a little bit confusing. The Talmud. Let's just remember the word Talmud. The Talmud is these oral laws, the root of it, and commentaries that were recorded at a certain time, and then incorporated into officially what would be considered Jewish law by Orthodox Jews. Okay, if there's questions about that, contact me. And the Talmud comes in volumes, and it's somewhat continuous in many ways. So it's huge. It's a huge set of material discussing all aspects of life. Okay. One example here, which is interesting, the approach to the Bible in the Talmud really goes so opposite to the way that, let's say, a Muslim or a Christian of any of the branches would approach the text. So I'm going to read you this famous passage that comes from there. So Rabbi Eliezer brought all the proofs in the world to try to prove his point in a debate they were having. Okay. And it was over whether or not, I think, an oven was kosher or not, meaning if it was approved to eat out. So that's almost immaterial to this, but you're having this debate over this oven, I think. So but they were not accepted. Finally, he said, if the law should follow me, let the carob tree prove it. And the tree was uprooted from where it was and thrown 100 cubits away. Some people say 400. They answered, we don't bring proofs from carob trees. In other words, he produces a miracle. And they say, oh, thanks, that's awesome that you had a carob tree uproot itself, but that's not what convinces us of what's in God's word, basically. Okay, then, if the law is like me, let the aqueduct prove it. And the water in the aqueduct started flowing uphill. And then the rabbis say, we don't bring proofs from aqueducts. He says, if I'm right, let the walls of this house of study prove it. And the walls started shaking, as if to fall down. Rabbi Yehoshua rebuked the walls. You keep out of this. This is a debate among scholars and no concern of yours. So the walls didn't fall out of respect to him, but they didn't stand up straight either out of respect to Rabbi Eliezer. So they remained short of leaning. If I'm right, let it be proven from heaven. And sure enough, a heavenly voice manifested itself and said, why are you giving Rabbi Eliezer such a hassle? He's right. In fact, he's right in all his arguments. The law should follow him. This is supposed to be like God talking. Okay. Rabbi Yehoshua stood up and said, it is not in heaven. What? So what he's doing, he quotes the Torah, and there's verses as the Torah is not in heaven. And essentially what the message is here is that God can't even nullify his own law, which the rabbis had down right as a consensus, and Rabbi Eliezer, as the minority, was wrong because the Torah is here on earth, and the rabbis understood through the consensus, and henceforth not even God could intervene to nullify his own law. Yeah, that's really wild, right? So then there's a story later that says, Rabbi Nathan visited with Elijah the prophet in heaven and asked him what God was doing when all this happened. Elijah answered that God smiled and said, my children have defeated me. My children had defeated me. All right, so I'm going to end here, and we'll continue on.